Yeah.
Thank you guys so much for joining another episode of Celeste, the Therapist Podcast. My name is Celeste. I'm a therapist from Boston. I have a very special guest. I'm going to have him introduce himself to you all.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dave Capozzi. I'm Celeste's friend. That's all I need for an introduction, right?
He is. And this is Dave's third time on the podcast. We have over 500 episodes. He was probably like number 8 and then another number. So we have a long history. And I just kind of want to share how we met. So years ago, I worked at a homeless shelter and Dave was there as well. When I met Dave, Dave was actually in the process of a transition, which I kind of want to talk about today. But I remember being in my Africana studies class, and I remember I was in the kitchen at the shelter, and we was learning about white guilt. And I remember, and I didn't know you were going through a process. Over the years, we've talked about this. And Dave, who, if you're not watching, is a very white man, who explained to me what white guilt was. So, there's so many things happening around the world. And I really want to help model what happens with people when they're going through a transition. And I think, Dave, you being a white male can help people kind of see things. And I know I have listeners from around the world and who may be grappling with some of the understanding. Because, with the way Trump is going around in the world, I think even some white people are starting to look at things differently. And there's a process that they go through that I would never understand as a Black female. So I think it would be great to kind of walk people through it. But as we start, I would love to hear about kind of your religious culture you kind of grew up in.
Yeah. So I'll just say that, to be clear, I taught you about white guilt, because I experience it. You were learning about it,
I was learning about it. Yeah. So
I was experiencing it.
Yeah, it was just a coincidence that he was experiencing it. So he was explaining to me what it looked like. And but for me, if you haven't been along, I've talked about different parts of my life throughout the years. I didn't understand systemic racism. There was a lot I didn't understand. It wasn't by accident. The systems do not teach people. You see, they're trying to erase statues and things that have to do with slavery because they don't want people to know. And I think for me, as a Black female who grew up in a lower socioeconomic status, if I only learn about my ancestors as slaves and then now we're not slaves, I do feel like we're doing better. Right. And so the design of the system is very intentional, because in college is when I start to understand when Mike Brown and with Trayvon Martin, there's video. And so Trayvon Martin was going on around that time. Mike Brown was going on around that time. And so my mind was something doesn't make sense. And so now, 2026, I'm fully awoke. But yes, that is a very fact. You're going through it. Thank you for that fact.
Yeah, no, it's interesting to connect it to my religious upbringing, because I grew up in Pentecostalism, which was the first 11 years of my life. Then it got more fundamentalist Baptist and non-denominational. And each one of those stops along the way had a very consistent theme, which was fear of God and hell and shame. And so much of the way that I processed and thought about the world was through this lens of not meeting my maker's design for me. So I was kind of primed my whole life to feel shame about who I was. And I think that because this culture is a white supremacist culture, sort of founded within imperial Christianity. It's no surprise that white guilt comes along with that, because we have this foundation of we're not good enough. And then when we're told we didn't meet the standard or we're doing something wrong, it goes immediately to guilt and shame, rather than to what can I do to participate in good good work and God's shalom and peace and all that. It goes the wrong way, because that's what imperial Christianity does.
When you say whites, just for people, because we hear the word white supremacy, tell people kind of like your kind of working definition of that.
Yeah. The way I would talk about white supremacy is essentially that whiteness or racism was created as a way to subjugate Black and indigenous bodies.
Mhm.
So pale skin European features were supreme. They were quite literally the upper class. They were the only people that were considered fully human, whereas anyone else was considered 3/5 a human or not human at all. So that system is embedded in the way that we created this country. It's the
Mhm.
foundation for the way we created this country. So white supremacy is pale skin, which is what I am, like a pale skinned individual,
Mhm.
has access to rights and to powers that people who are Black, brown, and indigenous did not have.
Mhm.
Now, while rights may change, fundamental philosophies and ideologies persist, and they get passed down from generation to generation. That's the stuff that we don't often get to talk about in white spaces, because we're just like, oh, well, people have rights now. There's no slavery. There's, civil rights happen. I grew up thinking Martin Luther King fixed racism, and still kids to this day. My nephew says that. So it's just that those ideas both like make us feel guilty when we wake up to them, but then we're sort of lulled to sleep by thinking that because some laws have changed, that ideologies and philosophies have not, like have changed as well, I should say, but they haven't. They're still there.
Yeah, and this Jane Elliott, activist, who she said, if you grew up white in America, the lens and the way you look at things, and like Dave is saying, the country, was based off of that superior, and so if you struggled with the guilt and you were during that time, what did you do to come to this kind of enlightenment? Because I think about the ego, and I think about how the ego doesn't want us to like look at the internal stuff, even outside of racism in general. Relationships, we don't admit like we're wrong. And so this is a big theme that's happening right now. And I feel like it's clear what's happening with what Trump's doing is very clear, right? You release people that rioted January 6th, right? You went after Don Lemon, like it's very clear, but I feel like people are so rooted to their identity that they're gonna have a hard. They're refusing to look and see the reality of this. It's clear. It's like black and white. It's not no ambiguity in what's happening. So tell me about that part.
Yeah, I can't take any credit. I was thrust into relationships with people who experienced life from very different perspectives and experiences than my own. And because I was exposed to that over and over again, my ego was just broken. It was like just over and over again I went to seminary in Roxbury, which is, as you know, because your office.
Yeah, my office is in Roxbury.
Yeah, which is, there are very few white folks in that area. So in classes of 50 or so, I'd be one of the two white people in the class. And so I was constantly being challenged about the things that I had previously thought, the way that I'd grown up to think about the world and relationships. Like you said, you learned from me what I was experiencing. I learned from you. You were my friend, and I genuinely believed your experience. And the more that I believed the experience of people who grew up differently than me, then I changed my perspective, which doesn't make me unwhite. It just makes me more able and willing to fight for people because they're my friends, they're my family now. They're no longer just a concept. And I think within the United States, we live within such isolated, segregated, individualistic ways of processing and living, that we just aren't exposed to those relationships naturally. I am so grateful that I was just like forced into relationships with people I would not have been by going to seminary in Roxbury. That kicked it all off for me.
And do you remember anything that stood out? So Roxbury, it's pretty gentrified now, but
Yeah.
back in the day, it was not so. Do you remember any experiences that stood out for you being in seminary and being, you kind of had this idea, I'm going to do good, I'm a good person. And,
Yes.
so tell me what that was like, that experience.
Yeah, I mean, I carried the "I'm gonna save the world" thing for a long time, even after waking up to racism. But I remember one of my first classes was about racism in the church, and there were these 2 students that came from our main campus up north in Hamilton, which is very affluent white community, and they came down to Roxbury for an urban experience, right? And they said very boldly in this class that racism is not a problem in the church or in the United States anymore. It's definitely not a problem in America in the church. And
Mm.
the class erupted. It just blew up. And that was one of my first experiences of just openly talking about racism,
Yeah.
period, in a
Oh,
public
wow.
setting.
Yeah.
And now I was 26 years old, Celeste. I was 26. So that's very late um, to be exposed to some of these ideas because you have got a fully formed frontal lobe. Your brain's developed. Your experiences are pretty solidified. But because I was so shaken by the way that people reacted, and those people were my friends by that point, I too was like, "Wow, I'm so glad I wasn't the one that said it." But I experienced what they said as true. I was like, "Yeah, what are they talking about? The church isn't racist."
Right, right.
But I thankfully kept my mouth shut. But yeah, that was one of the standout experiences for me that really started to like make me think more critically about the way I was raised.
Okay, so now you're in seminary, and then this process is happening. You're also then you go to the shelter, and so you're just around so many different people having all of these experiences, grappling with this process. At what point did you realize, it's part of my responsibility is like to be an ally and to be a part of what's going on, because you've been really outspoken about things for years, even before this eruption recently with this new administration.
Yeah, honestly, it's just friendship. It's like it's for me, it's been listening intently and trying to understand what my friends are telling me.
Yeah.
So, if you have a loved one who's saying, I'm at risk, I'm not living at peace, it's happening to me, it's not happening to you, um, you know, you're sort of compelled for love, like out of love,
Yeah.
to speak on it at the very least, at the very least. And then at some point, when you speak on it and you step into different ways of showing up for your friends, then other doors open up, political avenues. Like you find yourself at the state house speaking in front of the House of Representatives because you're like, I got involved with this Jobs Not Jails campaign for people who are incarcerated. I didn't know anyone that was in jail prior to all of this. And then all of a sudden, I had a lot of friends who had come out of jail or who
Mhm.
had experienced incarceration in one way, shape, or form, or they knew someone. So once you have those relationships, then you just start to step
And
in.
yeah.
Yeah, you step into it. You walk with a person, and where they're walking, you walk. And as long as what I would encourage people to do is like if you're doing that, do far more listening than you do talking.
Mm.
But I think people are going to make their mistakes too. So I don't know. I think whiteness makes you think that you have a voice in every room, which you typically do. But a lot of times that voice is drowning out the voice of the people that are actually needing to be heard. So I think that's one of the mistakes that I made along the way.
So for white people that are listening, especially because I do think there's genuine people that want to do something and don't know what. It sounds like listening is a great part of that. Being in community is a part of that process. Would you say those are two like really big things that can help with the process?
I think it's essential. Yeah, you got to like otherwise, especially in our really segmented world where we're all on just phones. It's
Mhm.
still easy to be on a soapbox rather than be in relationship. You're still just using your own
Yeah.
mind and not feeling what your friend, your family member, your neighbor is feeling. And I think that when you show up, with everything that's going on right now with ICE and people being murdered in the streets, um, it's a different conversation than it was like 15 years ago when I was like first getting involved politically. But it's the same conversation at the same time. It's the same injustice. Anyone that's waking up to it and being like, this country, what has this country become? This country has always been this. The fact
Yeah.
that it is able to be this way so openly is because it's always been there. It's just that a lot of people are now waking up to it because we have phones,
Yeah.
and we can see it.
So like you said, you've been doing this kind of activism for a while. Where do we go from here? I think, when I was on, so Sean, we brought you up last podcast, but I said to him, I feel like we're back in Germany, right? Like reading about that time frame. And I've been protecting my peace by staying off the news. There was a session I had with someone, and we were talking. There was some. I feel emotional just talking about it again. Just there was some like ICE stuff we were talking about, and I just can't believe people are being thrown into like jails and treated the way they're treated. And I don't know, like, where do we go from here? Because, I think my role right now is like I'm bringing up issues on the podcast. I'm talking about regulating your nervous system, creating peace, working with mental health. But where do you think we go now as a society where it feels like there's so much power being taken from us, and the rights? And my goal, like with this podcast, is I don't want people to shut down. I don't want people to lose hope. And I know it's very hard. There is this man in El Salvador who's Venezuelan who got shipped over to their prison. And he has been fighting his case all the way from El Salvador, and he's been winning. And
Wow.
and I was listening to a podcaster talk about it because he got shipped over there, and the lawyers are beating DOJ in court, and he has a court case coming up. They went as far as to try to bring up a charge. Well, it wasn't even a charge. He got pulled over in Tennessee in 2021, never got a ticket, but they're trying to like figure out a way to create a charge. And the podcaster was like, like, this sucks that he's going through this. I can't imagine. He was like, but the fact that he's fighting is like amazing. Like, and I hope it gives you hope that like we can like fight this fight together. But I'm curious because you've been very like involved in policy and politics. I've never been involved in this space in the way you were. Where you're seated now? Tell me what that looks like for society. What's been going on in your mind about this time?
I would say that personally, the efforts that I've been making are more like with my career. I've got back into working with people who are unhoused, and it's a hugely growing population, and a lot of people who are hiding from ICE. So we've got so much of my time is spent working within that world. I think that you have to figure out really what the stakes are and what you're willing to do. When it comes to, I can only speak for myself, but also for I speak for about what white folks might be able to do. I can't ever say, I'll say this. I heard some commentary about Kendrick Lamar not wearing a pin or something to the Grammys. I'm like, he doesn't have to wear a pin. His life speaks what he stands for. And I think you want to be that kind of person. You want your life to speak what you stand for. And I think what that looks like is what you do, Celeste. It's you just, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, make it matter. I think it's far too easy to just be like, well, I'm just going to take care of me and mine right now. I'm going to make money, do what I got to do, isolate. And plenty of people will do that. But for those that have a conscience and care, there are ways to become invested in the fight against fascism, against hatred, against bigotry and racism that don't look like being part of an anti-racist group or community organizing. It can look like being a therapist or a social worker or something else, where we being part of a system that is antagonistic to hatred, ultimately spreads hope for people, which is something that I think people on both sides, MAGA and otherwise, are actually lacking. That's why they latched on to this great orange man, because he represented hope for them when they felt like they were losing their way of thinking and being. I think it was misguided, obviously, but that's what ultimately people want, is to feel belonging and hope. So if you can provide that for people in a way that's positive and loving, people will be drawn to that. So I think the way to fight, obviously, call your politicians. They're politicians in the end, to be completely honest. They're doing what their constituents want. So I think that's why we're seeing change in Texas, that people are fed up, and so they're looking at different leaders. Um, but what you can do in your own time is learn. If you're activated, if your nervous system is activated, if you're angry or sad or whatever from what you see, look up what's happening in your area to fight for those things and start to make those relationships. And I
Yeah.
guarantee once you make that first step, then you meet people, then who knows where you end up in
Yeah.
a month,
Yeah. I love that. Learning, listening. And I think sometimes we're looking for something grandiose, like big, and it's like there's these small moments matter. These,
Yeah.
these small things. Don't think that because it's something like that small, like doesn't matter, but it does matter. So yeah, I appreciate you sharing that, and I think that people that are listening to this, especially white people that may be trying to figure out what is happening within them or what they can do, I feel like you kind of offered a piece of that for people.
Yeah, I mean, I hope so. I think it is daunting. It's overwhelming when you first start to learn about all this stuff, and it feels like, oh my God, I am in, Germany. We're not in Germany. We're in the United States, and the United States has always done a really good job of subjugating people and making people prisoners while others are roaming free. What incarceration has done in this country is much worse than people think it is. There's so many ways to fight injustice. The one that's in our face right now is these secret police people walking around in masks and killing people in the streets and stealing people that are innocent little kids. It's just unbelievable what we're seeing, right?
Yeah.
So I love what you do, because it's an opportunity to get people centered, and then to work out of a place where they're not, especially for white folks, not just coming out of this place of like self-righteousness and anger. We are part of the problem. We helped this to get to where it is. And that's not to make people feel guilty or ashamed. It just means we hadn't woken up, and so we were cogs in the wheel, not spokes. Like, we want to
Yeah.
stick a spoke in the wheel.
When Renee Good and Alex was murdered, I think a lot of white people were shocked. I honestly, I was shocked. I was like, they're murdering white people too. But there was white people that said, I can't believe this is happening. And Black people were like, yeah, this has been happening for a long time, but now you're seeing it because the person looks like you. The same way I think Dave having a conversation with a white person could be more helpful than me trying to explain. The same way President Obama said he would send Joe Biden in to talk to the congressman, because he said, I know, like, looking at him was easier to say yes than looking at me as a Black man. It's so, you know what I mean?
Yep. Yeah, this is it's unfortunate this is the world we live in, but instead of pretending like that's not the world we live in, use what you have to your disposal. Like,
Yeah.
I think that's great advice. Yeah.
Yeah. This was really good. I enjoyed this dialogue. I'm grateful that I have white friends. I know white people. No, I'm great. Me and Dave, so Dave has been a part of the process of just like I was going to start a nonprofit. Then I was like, I want to start this podcast. I'm like, what should I name it? And I was like coming up with all these names. And he's like, just call it Celeste the Therapist. I was like, really? He's like, yeah, like, what's wrong with that? And I was just like, okay, because I felt weird. Like, I didn't want to have my name and my face on the website. I was very much, as somebody didn't grow up in the line of entrepreneurs, and I think Black people a lot of times struggle with putting themselves up there. And I remember you were like, just call it Celeste the Therapist, and now it's Celeste the Therapist. Thanks to Dave.
I'll take something. Celeste, I love you, and like honestly, for me, there's just no greater message than the one you've always been giving, and I just will support everything you ever do.
Thank you. Well, Dave, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you so much.
My pleasure.
Until next time, beautiful people, I'll talk to you later.